hardcopy magazine, maar je kan er ook op Facebook volgen, waarbij ze de eugenics eigenlijk op best hoog niveau wel uitlegt, maar dat is voor de mensen onder ons die daarin geïnteresseerd zijn. Zeker een aanrader. Nou, hoe gaan we dat vandaag doen? Wij hebben 2 uur de tijd en dan gaan wij in stukjes en beetjes over de aap hebben. Kijk je mee op Facebook, dankjewel. Leuk dat je erbij bent. En volg ons, blijf luisteren. Als je vragen hebt, drop ze in de comments. Want we gaan er zeker op terugkomen. 4 onderdelen. Wie is Dr. Shantella? Wat is de geschiedenis van die aap? Stereotypen. Waar vinden we ze allemaal terug? En wat gaan we er tegen doen? Nou, dat was mijn introductie. Nu gaan we eventjes naar Don als eerste. En dan gaan we naar Dr. Shantella. Please, 1 second, Dr. Shantella. King Don Karleon, je hebt Black Lotus gebracht. Ik kom met die deur in huis vallen.
Well, what language will we speaking on? English, French, Dutch?
Oh, you want to speak French? I'm good.
I mean, yeah, you know, like, cause we like internationally right now, Dr. Shantella, Hotepu. So, like, which language will be speaking? Dutch, English?
Okay, we make an appointment now, or I speak Dutch, you speak French, and Dr. Shantella speaks English. So.
Très bien, on peut faire ça, y a pas de problème.
I'm too excited. So you see, Dr. Shantella, what we're going to do today, I'm going to try to translate where it's possible, if it's okay with you, especially if the viewers have questions. Sometimes it's easier to speak Dutch. So, and you see, Don Karleon speaks 12 languages, and he chose to speak French. So, I introduced you, of course, Don, where can we find Black Lotus?
Yeah, Black Lotus, Word of Words, is the latest music that I've released a month ago, co-working with multidisciplinary artist Lauren Kleber from Suriname and St. Lucia and the Netherlands. So Black Lotus, actually, it's available at all platforms, Deezer, Spotify, iTunes, YouTube Music, since Google Music doesn't exist anymore. Tidal, it's about spirituality. It's about female and male energy combined into one, Kundalini, the high vibrational. It's about growing to a better version of yourself. It's about the chakras. It's made, actually the music it's in 432 kHz frequency. That's the love frequency, also the frequency that regenerates your DNA, you know, because we do not only have to decode, but we have to regenerate all the goods in us, and you know, and it's go deeper than that. It was one of my first collaborations on my next album that's coming out on the 28th of February 2021. The album itself, it's called Kunaka. It should have been released this year in August, but I just pushed it little further because I was still getting inspired. And actually now I'm having like more than 31 songs selected for the album. I don't know how I did it, how I managed to do it, but but it felt like I had to release it on the 38th of February next year because it's the birthday of my granny. She's still alive, thank God. She's been really ill this year. It was really a battle, but she managed to stay alive, and she promised me she will stay alive until her birthday to witness the album. Kunaka means ascension. It's in a Kikongo language. It's all about spirituality, getting closer to the better version of yourself and getting higher to your consciousness and spirituality. So it's a really spiritual album, and the Black woman is God. So we are celebrating the Black woman in your album and love as the highest energy force, getting closer to the source.
I heard all about that. Thank
you. You want me to recap it in Spanish or in French?
one second. We will. At the end of the show, yeah?
Yeah.
You can do this great. All in French. Thank you. Dr. Dr. Shantella. Welcome, of course. You've been muted and we still want to hear your voice because it's all you have all this knowledge about the eugenics, which we won't talk about today.
No
We
eugenics.
don't.
Right. No eugenics.
Thank
Um,
you. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure, of course, as always.
Thank you always for having me. Always an honor. Always.
Shantella, could you please tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do? A little bit.
Sure. Just a little bit. My name is Dr. Shantella Sherman. I am a historian who specializes in race, women, and gender with a specialty in the American eugenics movement. Um, I manage a magazine called Acumen, which again tries to bridge historical information with journalistic integrity to ensure that when you're, kind of getting these stories about current events, that they are historically linked so that you understand that nothing happens in a vacuum. We train college and high school students as well as community folks to teach them how to observe and cover and document the people, everyday people who are around them. And I also am the author of the book In Search of Purity, Racial Uplift and Eugenics in America in 1915 and 1935. I also did a trashy novel years ago, which I don't really talk about, called Fester, but someone brought it up a few days ago and it's like, okay, yeah, people are still purchasing it. So yeah, I like to kind of dibble and dabble in different things, but the mainstay is history and trying to ensure that Black people as a whole understand the origins of some of the things that we deal with today, and they're able to deconstruct them so that they can change things and fortify themselves.
Especially the deconstruct and change. Because
Yes,
sometimes the question is, why do I have to learn this? Or why do I have to know this? But
right.
it's to deconstruct and change.
Absolutely. There are a lot of things that we are faced with today. We always say there's nothing new under the sun. So technically, if you're dealing with it today, chances are your parents, your grandparents, great grandparents, at some point have had to deal with something either similar or exactly the same. So we talk about how to talk to elders and hear wisdom, not just what they're saying, but get the wisdom that's in there. Deconstruct the world around you by the tools that you already have. And so, unfortunately, in many instances, we're using pop culture, popular culture, and defined popular culture is advertising, anything that's outside of your home, television, films that comes into your home. And sometimes is at conflict with the things that you're learning in your community. So your household, your family, your community are bombarded with images of things that are contrary to who you are and what you are. And you have to try and figure out, do I sit on this side of things or on the other side? So that is what pop culture, popular culture is. It's something popular that's outside of the frame of what you do.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to always be informed about that because it's used as entertainment sometimes. And this music man gets that. So when he starts talking about the wavelengths at which we hear things and how they impact our chakras, that's exactly the point. Sometimes you're listening or watching things that have very negative impacts on how you feel, your emotions, how you eat, how you sleep. But you just take that as a given and you feel sick from it. But you keep watching it because you think that it's normal. That is pop culture.
Mm-hmm. And you don't
So,
know that it's from there.
exactly.
Um, could we have another, that was a great example. Could we have an advertising example? I was talking to Sister Benji yesterday, and she said there's a new advertisement here in Holland. It's um, a fast food restaurant. I'm not going to call their name. And there's a family, and the family is black, and then the man from the family or one of the is in a sort kind of interracial relationship. Is that also pop culture or not?
It can be pop culture in the messaging that may be there. So I would always ask, when was the last time that you saw a family where the mother, father, and all the kids were very dark
Mm-hmm.
or had natural hair? So
Mm-hmm.
what you start to see is what is considered to be acceptable to mainstream culture, to the culture around you.
Acceptable.
And when you don't see it, basically what you're teaching people is that this is what you want to aspire to. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're a Black male, it's natural for you to be with a white female. And so your children will be mixed race. So when you don't see yourself, or you're seeing images that keep promoting one set over another, it is an absolutely a pop culture vehicle to kind of get into your head and tell you what's acceptable or not acceptable.
Okay. And pop culture we see in pop culture, television, ads, film,
Film,
music.
music,
That's pop culture.
right? Books, comic strips, anything that's outside your home. And sometimes it's conversations. And so we don't necessarily put that in, but sometimes it's the conversations that are had outside your window. Other times it's the conversation you're seeing in the news. But anything that's infiltrating your home that's not of your home is considered to be popular culture. And it's things to try and promote a popular way of saying things, as opposed to what you need to know, the values that are intrinsic to your culture.
Okay, I have the last example. Spoke to a sister today, and she said that on her work, she was asked to be Zwarte Piet, Black Pete. They asked her, and they asked her several times, and then she went and search for another job. So is that pop culture?
Swords of Pete definitely is a part of popular culture. So it's again something that, if you're trying to tell a Black person to dress up as this character, understanding that the character is considered to be demeaning inside the space, that's not only a pop culture vehicle, it's also racist because it's a form of intimidation. And basically what they're trying to let her know is that she should be comfortable with this, and this is okay for us. So why shouldn't it be okay for you? And if you push back against this, then it somehow means you're not a part of the group. So if she hadn't started to look for a new job, she may have felt under threat to not perform this at some point, and maybe they would have tried to malign her to get her out. So she figured it was probably better to go ahead and leave as opposed to being pushed out. But yeah, that was definitely pop culture.
Okay, we can talk about this for hours, but today's topic is, of course, the monkey, the app, as we say it. What is this about the monkey, Don? Do you recognize that? The monkey, always the monkey jokes, always the banana jokes. What is it with the monkey? This is what we are.
Yeah, because I remind it remind me of an accident that took place like 3 or 4 years ago with the football player of originally from Ghana but was adopted in Italy, called Mario Balotelli, who was really mad at Italian fans who are known to be really racist and really racist and even xenophobians. I don't know if I'm speaking the word right. Xenophobia, racist, and fascism. And he was really mad at them because anytime he was, getting the ball, they were yelling monkey sounds. And this happened all across Europe, but he was the first one to speaking out about it. And then it was like a real great commotion in the football industry about all the Black players in Europe who were getting the same treatment. That they were like anytime a Black player touches the ball, then those racist fans or public, they were yelling monkey sounds, like if we Black people are part of the monkey family, I guess, probably just like the great master told them. What was his name again? The one that said like human generated from monkeys and then two family stands. The one we mislearned at school
Charles
about
Darwin.
evolution. Yeah.
Darwin.
So it was like, so I was always skeptical about it, since I knew that Black people, we are nothing Neanderthal, so we are nothing monkey family like. So what was the heck of us having big lips, not thin at all, not be hairy, but those racists yelling, doing monkey sounds, well, they were the ones who had still Neanderthal DNA in the blood genetics. You know, so
what is it with the monkey jokes? What is that thing with the monkey?
yeah,
Dr. Shantella, please enlighten us.
Well,
how it started, who came up with the idea, how it started. Because I mean, you know, we knew like the moonwalk started in Brooklyn until Michael Jackson portrayed it on TV, and we could relate it to it. But
exactly.
how these people all over the earth came with a great idea of putting African in cages in the 50, you know, and all of that, where it all started.
Well, you know, you started off with Charles Darwin, and the reality is, you can go back, you know, a few hundred years before him, even, where you start to have folks, Europeans usually who are traveling, they're in contact with Africans the whole time. They're trading, you know, they're an outpost. There's business, there's commerce, there's education that's taking place with Europeans traveling to Timbuktu and other places to go to university. So it's understood that there have been um, times when, you know, everyone is operating on a very, very civil level. What starts to happen, though, is that as Europeans basically decide that they want to divide up the lands, they want to go into places and see people and then attempt to categorize them. You would never put yourself at the bottom of a chain. So you first come up with this concept of evolution, saying that men come from monkeys, and there's an evolutionary process that's supposed to take them every 1,000 or so years, and they gravitate from walking down on all fours to, you know, kind of hunched over. The hair starts to leave their bodies. They start to stand a little bit more upright. And so when you start to look at the gradations that these theorists use, what they would say is as the hair is removed from their bodies, their skin is black underneath.
Mm.
Okay. And then as that evolution continues, their skin begins to turn paler and paler until they're standing completely upright. Their brains are formed in a different type of way, and they've reached their full evolutionary process where they are now men as opposed to something less than men. So if you're seeing an African, what you're seeing is someone whose evolution has stopped at a particular point. And so these are theorists and lay scientists who are coming up with these theories that basically say these Africans are closer to being monkeys than they are to being men. Okay. And so this starts this entire eruption of, we want to have travel writers who literally go to different parts of Africa. They go to India, they go to different places, and wherever they see brown skin, it's automatically attached to the concept of evolution. And it's these people are less than. They haven't evolved to a point where they're at the same pinnacle, call it a pinnacle, as Europeans are. And of course, this is fallible and it's wrong and it's backward. Complicating this as well is the fact that, just like you're saying, Don, that you're speaking all of these different languages. Europeans are only speaking, for the most part, one language. So when they hear you speaking, even if you're speaking theory and philosophy and all of these great things, what they hear is mumbo jumbo. You know, they don't understand the language. And to a naked ear that doesn't understand the language, they think that you're talking foolishness, or they talk about the way you develop your words. Your skill set is off. You're still talking the way an animal would talk, as if you have rocks in your mouth. Okay. So all of these competencies go into this theory. So every time you meet a person who's from Pakistan or from some other place, even if they're speaking perfect English, to a European ear, a lot of times it sounds like they're not speaking English at all. All right. And even though, as you're saying, you're speaking French, you're speaking Spanish, you're speaking Dutch, you're speaking all of these languages, including English. You can understand them, but they can't understand you. The easiest thing at this point is to malign you, so you simply stop talking. All right. So now it becomes, you know, you have what they call the native elite, which are mixed race people who are in between the two cultures, who serve as the go-between. And so you stop having African kings talking directly to Europeans. You start having a go-between who's speaking the king's or the queen's English. Exactly. And that's when they start talking about the queen's English. So you have to understand, if you have Africans who, once again, are speaking 12 different languages, so that they're talking to the French and the German and the Dutch and all of these other folks, they're pretty brilliant, in addition to speaking their own languages. But all of a sudden, if I set the litmus test and then I draw it back to monkeys, you're speaking the language of the animals. And you know how, again, Africans, people of hue, tend to have a certain level of respect for animals.
Mhm.
All right. So so literally to a European mind, it becomes the reason why they like these animals is because this is their kinship.
Ah.
This is what they're from. Okay. So the monkey becomes part of this, but also in this country, Black people have been called coons. You're attached to a raccoon family. You're attached to bats. You're attached to anything that's primal, that hasn't reached a particular level of evolution. And there's a religious component to this as well. Eyedontha, but
Yeah. One second. Hold up. Wait a minute. So, okay, this whole monkey theory is based on the evolution of Darwin. That's it.
Right. And again, we've had a few people that preceded Darwin with this, but he's the one who solidified it. Okay.
Solidifying meaning?
Say again?
Solidifying meaning?
In other words, a lot of people would document this, but they weren't as famous with the theory as Darwin.
He made it popular.
Right. He starts to write it out. He starts to document it and travel and go into other places and into different school systems. And all of a sudden people go, oh, the way he says this, I like this. And so he learned part of his stuff from other people. And there's actually, and I'll find his name at some point, but there's an African man who Darwin studied under at one point, but he was using the taxonomy system.
Taxonomy system?
Taxonomy is how you classify animals and plants.
Oh, okay.
Right. So, so this is, so the odd thing is the science itself was learned and taught among Africans, but it went strictly to animals. It was understood that these people are men, but with animals, you would say they're different type of fish, and then the fish are classified in a certain way. So, these are the ones you eat. These are the ones you don't eat. These are higher fish and lower, not better or worse, but these feed on the bottom, like crab or shrimp or whatever. They're feeding the bottom. These are feeding mid, So crustacean, all this. Africans come up with the system, and then the system is basically used against them as Darwin is taught by an African how to do this, and then very slowly pulls Africans into this space. Okay. Right.
So let's pause there because it's really getting out of, Okay, back to the basics. The basics is evolution, as Darwin put it, because evolution is a theory also.
It's a theory. That's the
theory.
Right?
Yes. Theory. And in the theory, they said, okay, animal became man, and Black people just didn't evolved furthermore, so they stayed just above the ape.
Yes.
Not so. Okay, hold that thought. Mensen, dit is gewoon ongelooflijk. Wat Dr. Shantella eigenlijk zegt, is dat de theorie van apen vergelijken met apen. En het is een theorie, want ze zeggen wel dat eugenics een science is, maar dat is een pseudoscience, betekende dat het een theorie is. En de theorie is gebaseerd op Darwin zijn theorie weer. Dat is de evolutietheorie. Dat dieren uiteindelijk mensen zijn geworden, apen zijn mensen geworden en Afrikanen zijn blijven hangen bij dat stukje, zijn niet verder geëvolueerd tot Europeaan, tot mens. Dus daar komt dat hele idee van de mens vandaan. Okay, back to you, Dr. Shantella. But don't we know that we are all descendants from Lucy?
Well, again, science eventually begins to tell the truth. And so whether you want to call Lucy or you want to call her Eve.
Yeah,
so she may go by a veritable group of names, but when you start breaking it down and saying, okay, the very first person that we find on this earth is an African woman, and then you start to try and reconstruct what she looks like based upon that DNA, she looks like us.
Exactly.
Right? So and
So how it's possible? Because a lot of our listeners and watchers, they know about Lucy, they know about Dinknish. That's an African name. African Eve, you can find it also on the timeline. African Eve Dana, you can also find it on internet if you just type it. So how can this be? So if we know our history, we know African Eve, and we know now this history based on the monkey, and it's totally what?
Basically, what you would basically how the European mind works with this is to say, well, yes, she was first, but she was still primitive, and there was still an evolutionary process that was taking place. And so, right, so they're not going to let you get, they're not going to let that go, because there have been way too many books and documents and universities and science and methods that were created based upon this evolutionary scale. And so if you say, you know, is it the environment that makes a Black person Black, or is it the genetics, or is it, they're trying to break all of these things apart, but it's still easier for them to say monkey to man. And because you're not fully man, you're closer to monkey, right? And so the behaviors, this is another reason why when you see Black people that are particularly athletic, they're winning in different sports. And so when you talk about football or soccer or whatever the case might be, you immediately have the announcer start to talk about these folks as if they're animals, all right? And so they start to talk about their muscle tone and the jaguars and the tiger-like, or when you find, we just talked about Gabby Douglas, the gymnast, and how she did an amazing job. She scores a 10 at the Olympics. She's amazing. And immediately after she wins, they go to a commercial, and it's a commercial with a monkey in it. Later on, she is described as the flying squirrel. You never heard Nadia Comaneci. You never heard any of these white gymnasts who were fabulous and amazing in their own right compared to animals.
I witnesses the same. Sorry to interrupt you, with this African French how you call it, ice dance queen, Surya Bonali. She used to be world champ and everything, and every time they were commenting her games, they were always using those hard war words, and she was not so grace, and as the opponent's womb was white, it always was. And I remember this as being on my teenage years, and I forced myself to be in love with her because I was upset about how they were portraying her, and I was like, no, she's great, she's beautiful. How come? So that really stuck into me until, I guess, like last year, when I watched a special report on her and how this was, all those years went for her, then it reminded me of how it used to go, and really just put everything together. Like, we're not always aware about how they use their words to redefine us among them.
Exactly.
My question is, what are the platforms that this ape is being constantly fed to us until we start believing it ourselves?
And it's in everything. It's in everything. It's on everything. And so I think you show in one of the images the photo of the basketball player who has a white female with him, and he's bouncing the ball, and he has his mouth wide open. And it's like, all right, this is a throwback to a poster that was used in World War II to get people to enlist. And the idea was that these savages, this is, again, it's the anytime you have an enemy against a European nation, they tend to project the image of a hostile monkey onto whoever the person is, whoever the invader is, or whoever the threat is, because there's this mental thing about this primitive group who's going to come and destroy this whiteness. All right. And so I could play around with that for forever, because this, again, it's the idea of Black manhood and Black masculinity, and anything that's considered to be non-white that can threaten whiteness. And so you immediately cast this person as a giant ape with a club. And in the original enlistment ad, The white woman has fainted, part of her breasts are exposed. And so that suggests that she's been ravaged. She's been raped at this point by this ape who's carrying her off. And so you must, it's symbolically, white men feel compelled to enlist in the military because you want to save your white women and you want to save the nation. And so when you see this black man with a basketball holding on to this woman, this white female, and his mouth is agape in the same way, it's the exact image of this ad. You're asking, you're playing the monkey, you're playing the gorilla for this, but do you not understand what the symbolism of this is? And when asked about it, he said no. You know, he just thought, you know, but he was just posing. He didn't get it. But the folks who set him up to do this knew full well what they were saying. This is the same type of threat. This is a monkey rather than a man. Okay. And we need to deal with that.
The another one is the ad with the two boys, the one with the sweater on. And I've read that the parents said, "What is the fuss all about?" Your response, please.
Yes. Well, you know, I understood where the parents were attempting to go with this because they didn't have a clear understanding. And this, again, is what I mean by deconstructing and learning your own history. You have to understand that some things are subliminal and some things are just downright. They're in your face. Now, the parents said this child had 36, I think, changes of clothes for the ad series. And it just so happened this was one of the ones that they used for, but they'd also used, you know, 15 others for this ad campaign. So it was like, what was the big deal? Because you'd also seen him in other things. That was what they felt. Now, me, on the other hand, it would have been, I need to see exactly what you're trying to put my child in before you do it. And this is something, you know, racially, I don't want it there. But again, that's an issue for the people in advertising that don't have a diversity, you know, a diverse group of people. When you have Black people in a room and they have a historical understanding, they would have immediately said, don't put the Black kid in that, okay? Don't put a person of Latin descent, you know, in a shirt that says tacos on it or something. Just, you know, you need to pull back a little bit. And, you know, so the thing about it is you had a lot of Black people up in arms and they created their own shirts and put them on little white kids. And it was equally racist, but they made their point. So it's like, if you said this is the whitest marshmallow in the box, would that be racist? Absolutely it would, you know, but you wouldn't think to do that.
Yeah. Don, do you have
Yeah, I wanted to ask Dr. Shantella, how did they use thousand into this killing pop machine? Because Tarzan was the king of the jungle while not being from Africa, and he saved the white woman who were raised by savages, right? So I'm like,
well, this is the thing. Again, that's a, you know, Eyedontha, I'm going to touch on this for a minute, but that's a eugenic frame because what you're saying is his DNA, his great genes as a white man meant that he could be taught how to survive by these savages, even though he was superior to them. And at some point, his natural inclination to rule over them would raise up. And that's exactly what happened. So he can speak the language if he so chooses. All right. But he doesn't have a Black best friend, an African best friend. He has a monkey as his best friend. Pay attention to that as well. So this white man chooses to hang out with the monkey rather than hang out with the African. In all of Africa, he has no connection whatsoever. To me, that even said that the monkey has more sense and more camaraderie with this white man than an African does. Right. So, I mean, we could break that down a million different ways. He's swinging through trees and he's going through all of this, and you eventually get a white woman that's there with them, Jane, and they end up having a kid that's there. But all of them rule over the Africans and have taken domination as well over the rest of the animals, because the Africans are considered to be animals as well.
So actually that is also equal racist, but it's
yes,
on like covered, and this is why we have to deconstruct.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. Okay, so the thing about the ads is that I saw like similar thing happening with other other ads and other firms and other whatever, and it's the same format. They make the ad, and then they apologize. What is that all about? Please.
It doesn't resonate. You know, again, sometimes I think it's basically because, you know, maybe the person does not know.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe these are things that the ad agency has always done.
Okay.
Maybe the people in charge don't understand, again, because there are no Black people in the room that can stop them and say, okay, this is inappropriate. We can't do this. Let's think of another way of handling this. And then the ad agencies never ask. So it's one thing to do it once and get hit with, you know, this is inappropriate, and then you apologize for it, but immediately say, to keep this from happening again, we're
Mm-hmm.
going to ensure this, and this. The reality of it is, they, a lot of times, I guess they just figure, if Black people want their products, and especially if they're high end or considered to be luxury items, Black people are going to buy them without necessarily thinking, this is not something that I want. It's something that demeans me. It's inappropriate. They aren't really thinking along those terms. And so they get away with it year after year after year.
Mm. So what I'm hearing is this is how we can change this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then demand, not just demand the apology, but demand that these executive offices have Black people in them, and not as the person who gets the coffee, but as the person who makes decisions, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Or before you send out your ads for the year, for the next 5 years, that you have a subcontractor, even if you don't want to bring a Black person in, you have a Black company that literally looks at all of your ads before they're sent out to go, this is a no, this is a no, this one we, you know, I'll deal with, this one rework it, to kind of help you understand better what it is that you're doing. The bottom line with these agencies that they want to make money.
So the way we can change is not to buy the product if it's
Don't
doesn't.
buy the product, and make it clear you will not buy the product unless and until they have people who look like us in spaces where decisions are being made. You know, we have to be the decision makers I'm not just going to buy in because someone told me it looked good if
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't benefit me and my community beyond this point.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you for this. Can you do a recap, Dawn, or do you want me to do a recap?
Well, hold on a sec,
Or you
because
have another
okay,
question?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because like we talk on an industrial level, right? But just on a micro level, like just on an everyday basis for the person who got who's getting involved with comments, you know, indirect or direct to that monkey stereotype, or even parents who are raising their kids coming back from school crying like you know, those roommates, classmates, you know, they call them out for monkeys. What can we use just on a personal level to adjust that? You know, which kind of tool we can use to put under that?
Well, first and foremost, I think there needs to be a conversation with all children about name calling. All
Mm-hmm.
right. And so, again, unless you're a particularly vicious person, you don't want any child to be maligned. But there are times when Black parents have to teach their children that white kids have feelings too. And before you walk away crying, you know, this is going to sound abrupt, but before you
Mm-hmm.
walk away crying, you make sure that other kid is walking away crying. Now, I'm not saying you put your hands on them or anything, but you know, if we're just calling each other words back and forth, then you find some words that hit home with these white kids as well. Now,
Mm-hmm.
when it's children, it's just that. When you start talking about the teacher in the school, that's something totally different. All right. Because kids can be cruel just because that's what kids do. So
Mm-hmm.
my thing is, as long as these are kids with each other, it's like, all right, we find a way as children to you know, kind of maneuver through that. But when it's an adult
Mm-hmm.
calling kids names, then there's something else that as a parent you need to get in and you need to deal with that. If it's, you know, because everyone has to be held to a standard. Why are people no longer losing their jobs for speaking out of turn?
Mm-hmm.
Why are, and that's what you must demand. That's really where it comes down to, especially when you start to see that Black people are becoming the majority in a lot of these spaces. And that's the reason why some of these terms are starting to, you know, reemerge. That's why some of this anger and angst is at a heightened level, because all of a sudden we're talking about global numbers where the minority is now the majority. Okay. And all of a sudden you have white people feeling threatened in their own spaces. And so they're starting to revert back to this thing of monkey. It's like, all right, half of you have been, intimate with Black people. You got Black girlfriends and Black boyfriends and mixed race kids. But it doesn't stop you from saying monkey or gorilla or ape or whatever it is when you're upset or when you're feeling threatened. And you have to go back to where's that mentality and what does that mean? That is a projection of yourself, because like you said, that Neanderthal gene, that genetic code, it's not in us. All right. We weren't banging around and slopping around and eating raw meat and acting crazy. That wasn't us. So, so sometimes that conversation when it's between kids, it can be as vicious as they need to make it. It's like, you better look at Romulus and Remus. Some of you have a history where you claiming you were birthed by dogs and suckled by them. And that would explain a lot of your anger and your animosity and your viciousness and your violent, traits. You can flip that around as kids and have those types of conversations. That's not a conversation I would want a child to necessarily have with an adult, because it's the job of adults to protect children. All right. But, some teenagers back and forth with other teenagers calling, Black kids monkey. Okay, well, your daddy like monkeys. What are you talking about? When they say you're a monkey's uncle, do you know what that means? Right. It means that that's an American term.
Explain to us.
You about to make me go left field real quick. So that term monkey's uncle, that comes from the fact that you want to call Black people monkeys and apes and gorillas. But guess what? Your brother. Well, you're right. You've been sleeping with half the monkey in the neighborhood, if that's what you want to do. All right. So you're not going to act like we aren't a part of this, in some instances, the same family tree. All right. And at the same time, you're not going to malign me without me being able to tap you on your shoulder and go, some of you actually turned out light enough to pass as white, but you part of the monkey chain as well. If you're putting it on me, you got to put it on your daddy. You got to put it on your grandpa. You got to put it on your grandmother. Don't take the women out of this as well, because white women have been just as much involved in this monkey thing as the men, so they have to own that.
Okay, thank you. I think it's time for a short recap. This was the first en de second. Ik denk dat het even verstandig is om iets in het Nederlands te vertalen. Waar het in het kort op neerkomt, is dat de apengrap, of de grap over de apen, is...
de theorie over de apen.
De theorie. Nou, we zijn begonnen met, wat is dat ding met die grappen over de apen? Toch? Altijd die grappen over apen, altijd de bananenjokes. We kennen ze allemaal. En op een gegeven moment, sommigen kunnen daar veel beter tegen dan anderen. Maar het is belangrijk om te kijken waar het vandaan komt, zodat je er ook wat tegen kunt doen. En wat dokter Shantella ons heeft verteld, is dat, zeg maar, de theorie van de evolutie van de aap tot mens van Darwin, dat is zijn theorie, of in ieder geval, er zijn nog voorgangers geweest, enzovoort, maar waar het op neerkomt, is eigenlijk gepopulariseerd. Ja. En uiteindelijk betekent, wat ze daarmee willen zeggen, is dat de evolutie van de aap, zwarte mensen blijven hangen in de evolutie net boven die aap. En de witte mens is verder geëvolueerd. Maakt niet uit, er zit geen science, er zit geen logica, maar dit is wat er gepusht wordt op de verschillende platformen waar wij het net over hebben gehad. En dat is de popular eugenics, zoals Dr. Shantella dat noemt. En volgens mij heet dat ook, dat is popculture. En dat wil zeggen dat het door advertising, dus adverteren, commercials, televisie, muziek, zelfs boeken, op straat, in gesprekken. Overal wordt dat gepopulariseerd. Met andere woorden, het wordt zo vaak besproken, zo vaak bewezen, zo vaak over gepraat, dat je op een gegeven moment gaat geloven dat het waar is.
Ja.
Toch?
Ja.
En nu, wat kun je daartegen doen? Ja, daartegen ageren in principe wil zeggen dat je het niet accepteert. Als je kind dat meemaakt, of als een bepaalde manier met je kind wordt gesproken op school, dan moet je die gesprekken hebben. En eigenlijk de geschiedenis erbij halen en zeggen dat...
de kinderen beter berusten om zich ook verbaal, tussen kinderen, te kunnen verwoorden. En als het gaat om volwassenen die tegen kinderen dat zijn, of dat zeggen, dat de ouders als volwassenen ook dat gesprek aan moet gaan met die volwassenen. Ja. En op een industriële level is dus dat we gewoon niet die producten moeten consumeren, want het gaat om het geld en de macht
Ja, en het gesprek aangaan wil zeggen dat je vanuit de geschiedenis, de feiten, dat je genoeg hebt om je te verweren. Met andere woorden, de Neandertaler bloed, dat zit eerder, wat dichter bij de aap is, zit eerder in de Europeanen en in de Afrikanen.
Oh ja, dat was ook belangrijk inderdaad.
Dat is een hele belangrijke. Dus daarom je
medeverantwoordelijkheid. Dus het is echt een medeverantwoordelijkheid. Dus als je mijn monkey noemt, dan ben je ook onderdeel daarvan. Want ja, je oom, die zat lekker die monkeys te verkrachten. Dus waar hebben we het over? Inderdaad, dus gewoon dat medeverantwoordelijkheid terugleggen naar diegene die dan onwetend of bewust of onbewust daarmee zich zo uiten. En dergelijks. Maar het heeft te maken met superioriteit en zich superieur willen stellen ten opzichte van de zwarte persoon. Zeker als het gaat om witte.
Juist. Okay, Dr. Shantella, that was a really short recap, but we had to, for a while. So now it's integrated into normality that we start to believe it and that we look like apes. We were at a school, we had a school session, and I asked the students in the class, okay, just the picture, we had a picture of the ape and the black man beside it. It's all over the internet. Look like apes, blah, 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 blah. So that means that our children are also seeing it. And I asked the whole class, and it was a mixed class, is it true? Does he look like an ape? And everybody said yes. And they even had clear ideas why, because he looked woest like this. This is why he looked like. So this is so integrated, so into the mindset that even we are starting to believe it. And I know you already gave us some of the tips, but the psychological part, how do we do this?
Again, you have to broaden the frame of what it is that you're seeing. So, if you look, for instance, at the average Italian, and you look at his features, especially if he's continental Italian, you say he looks like an ape, looks like a monkey. Features, you can have all of the features that we're talking about that we've attributed to Blackness and to some type of degeneration. It appears in white people as well. It appears in European stock. So, you have to literally look at who's saying what. And so again, this means you teach your children, you teach yourselves at home, first and foremost, so that you're bracketed and girded up. So when you go outside your home and someone says these things, you can combat it if you need to, if you feel like you need to. But literally, it's like, all right, if I could find a picture of Paul Sorvino, he's a lovely actor. I think he's great. All right. But when I look at his features, I'm going, yeah, he could, we can make that same type of argument about him. It's not just Yaphet Kotto. Now, the only things that the actor Yaphet Kotto, if I put him next to Paul Sorvino, I can say both of them look like apes to me. All right. The only difference is Yaphet Kotto is an African man, dark man, black man. And so if you can see it in one but not in the other, you need to test your own gauge. All right. To figure out why you can see it in one, but you can't see it in the other. And then why you would attribute savagery and animalistic characteristics onto one, but not onto the other. All right. So now if you're just a racist, you're going to find it. But if you start to pull back and you look at this, almost any person could resemble any type of animal if you want to play those games, You just have to deflate the argument sometimes. And because again, people who are just trying to be ignorant and they're throwing bananas and they're making monkey sounds and, aping around at these football games. It's like, all right, these are a bunch of backwards white footballers who are just out to demean and create problems. And if the industry wanted them out, it'd be simple enough to identify who they are and tell them you can't come back to these games. All right. You understand? So it's like you must, part of the game, the game is sportsmanship, and sportsmanship is not just on the field, it's in the stands. So, you literally have to look at that and go, if the industry wanted to end this, they could.
Have done something.
They could. Yeah. But so it's a belief system. It's a belief system.
So we ended not by going to the soccer games or not acting too emotional, or it's not too emotional. So how do we, it's like the set P more, like.
this is the thing. It's only because the footballers, a lot of times they are thugs. So there's violence that follows a lot of this aping around and all of this. I would not want to be a Black person in the stands. Now they may not be able to run out on the field and do damage to the footballer, but a person in the stands where they're hyped up and they're drinking and now they're roused up and they're feeling whatever it is that they're feeling, the violence naturally occurs. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so based on that, it's like, you can't say, well, we won't go to the games. You wouldn't want to be at the games anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So the footballers are not supported for the most part by Black folks that are there. They're supported by the natives.
Corporations. Yeah.
So that's why, that's their space. It's like if you go into some pubs, some bars, you can walk in and look and go, oh, this is not the place where I'm supposed to be. And you just kind of back out. We don't need to make an issue and say, well, if I come in here, you mistreat me, I won't come back. You're not wanted. And so that's what this tells me, you're not wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And so if it's that, it's like, all right, sometimes have your space. I'm not prepared to try and integrate an entire stadium and risk my life for it. So they sold you the ticket, but you have to deal with the anger and whatever else is going on in the minds of the people there. So that's not something I would necessarily approach that way.
That's clear. Really good thought there. But since we were at the sports and we touched the ads and what about the schooling system? The schooling system and this thought, is it also there?
I mean, of course, because the whole thing is biology books haven't changed. Evolution is still being taught.
Yeah, for real.
So, wow. So
definitely
is that the teacher is looking at my child when it's at school like Darwin does.
And the school system is often looking at your child in the same way that Darwin did. So when we're talking about even placements of where your child can go, these aptitude tests that your child is supposed to, score a certain number on in order to be in the school system with them. And I will stress this often. I know a lot of times we want to break the back of the system by sending our kids into spaces and say they're the first Black student there, or they're one of 10 and there are 3,000 kids there. Don't do it. They will get the education, but they will be traumatized in the process in ways that you cannot fix easily. Okay. I know you want to make your point, but your children don't get to be the sacrificial lambs for that. Okay. That is just, I'm adamant about that. I get it. I know you're saying I have a right and I pay my taxes and the child has the aptitude and the ability to be there. But we just got finished talking about the fact that when they're teenagers and these are white kids, these are European kids that are doing this type of stuff, the system is not necessarily on the side of your child who is the victim of the taunting and the bullying and the acts of violence and all of these other things. This child's value, their worth, their mental health, their emotions are all tied into the 8 or 10 hours they have to spend 5 days a week in a room with a bunch of people who don't want them there and who's making it clear they don't want them there. So in addition to the people, you now have lessons in English, in science, and biology, and chemistry, and all of these other areas of study that are telling them that they are monkeys, they are savages. If it's a psychology class, they're talking about, someone just showed me a book where they were talking about violence and born criminals. And the photo that they had in the sociology book had a Black child with his hands handcuffed behind him. What does that do to the psyche of that child? Okay, so every time, all the books that you're seeing with white people in them and the history books, and they have their powdered wigs on and they're doing great things. And when you start to see Black people in the textbooks, they're in chains as slaves or they're in handcuffs. Or you're talking about poverty and whatever else, it's always something very negative. So when you have, these types of attacks coming both in the book, with the teachers, and with the students, you are sending your kids into a space where they are not capable of fighting that type of anger and racism. And it's not fair to put them into those spaces. It's just not.
Okay, and let's say, for instance, this is a school that is mixed and still the same system. And how do we as, because in here in Holland, you don't have too much, You don't have too much. So how do we as parents?
What you mean by sister? What you mean by too much? Too much opportunities? Too much what? We don't have too much what?
We don't have
Choices?
choices. We don't have too many
Choices. Okay.
choices. I mean, where I live, I have perhaps 2 or 3 schools. That's it.
This is I think the other imperative, and I just literally got off another call before I started doing this one with an educator who's been doing this now for maybe 20 years as the head of a school. Okay, this is a brother, all right, and he's on point, he's on game. His thing is, you would not send your kids to your enemy to be educated and expect your enemy to tell them the truth. Okay, so that's the first thing. We know better. We know better. So why don't you have an after-school program that can offset whatever lies or misinformation being told on one hand to your kids after class? Why can't you have Saturday school? Why can't you have a volunteer? And again, his thing is, don't bring up money.
Yeah.
Don't bring up money. I want you to find a free space where you can go, or Zoom. Okay. I want you to find some people who will say, you know, Sister I, if you want to talk about history, then you'll be the history person. All right. Brother, if you want to talk about music, you be the person that talks to them about the influence of music on chakras and da 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 da. It's a way we're educated enough. We know enough at this point, but we should not be sending our kids in to, you know, to have to deal with these burdens when it's easily lifted. They're going to do what they do. It is our responsibility to do what we're supposed to do. Yeah. All right. And so we didn't get this far by having lackadaisical parents or grandparents or great grandparents that were like, oh, just throw them out there. They literally had conversations with you before you left the house. Then they had conversations with you in your places of worship and play and everywhere else to kind of let you know, okay, when you're here, then this is how we handle that. But in the meantime, this is who you are. This is what's expected of you from us. You don't worry about them. We are the authority in your life, not them. We are the authority, and we're telling you, you open the door, you help the elders, you do this, you carry yourself in such a way, you know, that it shows who you are with us as opposed to who you are with them. And for some reason, we're not doing that anymore. We're still saying they're not teaching my kid this, and they are not doing X, Y, and Z. And guess what? They never have. Yeah. So why are you expecting them to do it now?
So
there's too much at stake. Yeah, there's too much at stake.
So again, it's up to us. There are some people, and we're really happy with that. Started, I think it's in Southeast, starting a weekend class.
The Sunday school, Sunday school. Yeah.
So, and also there's a sister was starting in Rotterdam. So we need more of those. And as you were saying, Zoom is of course a way to educate. So also deconstruct. So you can change that, but we can, you know, make sure that they get other information about themselves, and we have to this is what you're saying, right? This is our responsibility.
And it's our responsibility. And one of the things that we do here in DC, we have what we call the tiny bookshelf. Okay. And there are these little boxes all over town where I may go and put 10 books in it. Oh. If you want a book, you pick it up and you read a book, and you can put it back in there. You can put it in another one, or you can take that one and put a book in that you're finished reading. And the goal is to ensure that folks who don't have access to libraries, there's no library in their neighborhood, and they can't afford books. They don't want to go to a bookstore. They can't afford books. You always have a ready source of Black books, books that you need to get a hold of, that you can read, and you can mark them up if you want to. You can say, I want to be able to see what you saw when you read it. You understand? And then if you want to just literally, you know, start this thing where you're having conversations about the books that you're reading so that everyone's on the same page. We do it here, and those books fly out. As soon as we put them in, we come back an hour or so later, those books are gone, you know? And so because I'm dealing with newspapers that get, you know, free copies of books sometimes, you know, we tell all the newspaper people, when you have your books and you're finished with the review, put the books in these boxes so people can just take them. These are things you can do on your own. All right. If you know people that want to do book exchange, make sure you spray them down so you don't have coronavirus on them, even though I'm not going for all of them. But, you know, give people books for holidays. Start talking about the importance of the book, so that even if I can't get to you and Zoom is broke and we don't have any electricity, you have a book in your hand, you have access to the world.
Okay.
All right.
Yes, that's a really good one. So we've covered almost all parts of the platforms except for two. I think one of those is the medical care.
Oh,
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
the
I'm sorry.
medical, and that's the unfortunate thing about that. Once again, because it's believed that Black people are more akin to monkeys, gorillas, apes than they are to people and humans, it means that medicine, like science, believes that all Black bodies are deficient. So you'll notice whenever a disease or something comes up, you'll immediately have some type of person, a statistician that comes in and says, Black people are more likely to get this than white people. And then when you start looking at it a few months down the line, it's like, no, Black people got over it and now white people are dying. Okay. You never see the flip. Okay. But it's basically the medical system is set up to look at your body coming in as something that's deficient, that's derelict, that's not fully formed, that's not fully capable, that's full of morbidity, meaning you'll die quicker and sooner, mortality, the deaths are coming from things that could be prevented, and it can't be prevented because it's just in you not to do the right things. Okay, you're susceptible to everything. All right, so you are the disease that comes into the neighborhood and just kind of contaminates different spaces. And so that is the logic behind the medical communities sometimes. The other thing that's critically important is that it's also believed that Black people can't go through non-invasive therapies. So for instance, if you have, the doctor says you have high blood pressure, the doctor doesn't say, okay, well, what are you going through that could be causing your blood pressure to be elevated? The doctor will immediately think the reason why your pressure is high is probably because as a Black person, you eat poorly, you're overweight, this, and this. They don't say you could be stressed or you've lost family members recently or that you're going through something that's elevating your pressure. If this is a European person, so medication is automatically prescribed. It's been shown now that a lot of the pills that are taken for anything, but specifically for high blood pressure, can cause you to develop diabetes, okay? Or can cause you to have liver failure or kidney failure. So you have a whole bunch of Black people running to dialysis now because their kidneys are going haywire. And it makes it seem as if this is just because you're Black and you're prone to having these types of conditions, when it's the medication that you're taking over long periods of time that actually caused it. Now, a white person coming in and saying they have high blood pressure issues, the first thing the doctor says is, what's going on in your life? Are you not sleeping? Are you stressed out about something? Have there been a death in your family? Have there been major changes? And therapy is usually the first thing that they tell them that they need. You need to go to a yoga class. We want to hook you up with the psychologist that you can sit down and talk your problems out with, which is a very humane approach to getting that blood pressure down. But because we're closer to animals than we are human, the belief is that you can't talk through our emotions because we don't have emotions. Okay? We don't have what it takes to stay the course and be treated in a way that's more humane. So you just give us pills to mask whatever's going on, and we end up getting sick or sicker based upon the medication that you're given. So the medical field is rife with the belief that monkey pseudo man-like, but not quite man theory. And so it comes out in the competencies of the doctors in many instances where, at one point when they're saying Black doctors should treat Black people, I believe that. I absolutely and wholeheartedly believe that, because many of them are naturopaths, or they'll say things like, I need to find out how you're sleeping. I need to find out where your emotions are. And recently in this country, the Psychological Association of American Psychological Association just announced that racism in this country is such a pandemic that it is at the heart of high blood pressure, sleeplessness, weight gain, emotional trauma. It's all a whole list of things psychiatrists and psychologists are now coming forth and saying these are causing medical issues with Black people. So it's not so much that I'm Black, it's the way you're treating me because I'm Black that's causing me to have health conditions. And now you're saying it's because of racism, as opposed to what you have been saying, which is I'm more of a monkey than I am a person.
Wow.
And, all right. So there's a causality there. There's a direct causality. It's not because I'm Black, it's because you're mistreating me that my levels are different. And then at that, initially what you said was the reason why my levels are different is because I'm more of a monkey and I have no coping skills and I'm debased and I'm full of disease. You know, I'm susceptible. So yeah, the medical field is horrid with things like that.
A good one to point out, because never heard this before anywhere, and we just go there and trust, trust the system, and it's not to distrust, but it's to be fully aware and to know what it is you can expect from a doctor, right?
And it's the same thing that you would go through when you're talking about the teachers. You know, who determines who becomes a doctor? How many Black doctors do you have where you are? If you had to travel a certain number of miles or distance outside of where you are to see a Black doctor, would you make that leap? If there's an organization that's offering healthcare, could you say to them, we would really feel comfortable with a doctor who looks like us? Can you get us 5 or 10 of them into this neighborhood to ensure that we're all healthy? We would really appreciate that. Is that something that they would work on? So you can make the demand. You can also just simply ask. And a lot of it is, if you can get the people there, they will tend to treat you and understand you in ways that are culturally competent. And there'll be better health outcomes as a result.
Okay, thank you for that. That was really insightful, wasn't it, Don? Whole other
For real.
I was like done.
Information. No, I was just like, well, Dr. Shantella was, explaining about the biological aspect of this matter. Suddenly in my head, I was wondering, oh, but hold on a second, how is about that spiritual, but that the spiritual aspect of that matter, like how did religion get involved, so like, because we're having the biological into this matter, we're having the pop culture being influenced. So, and I was still thinking, okay, so what about our spirituality, or what about religion? How did they take part of it?
Can we, because there's another platform, and after that platform, can we just touch on the spiritual? Then we go to the high, because the last platform is housing. Haven't spoke about that one. Housing and the monkey, because this is all about the monkey, right? It's all about the monkey. Yeah, we tend to.
Housing follows the same rules and laws, and I think we talked about this a few months back when we did the screening of The Banker. And we talked about how certain neighborhoods, when they do city planning, the city planners will determine where Black people should live based upon things like the well runoff, the water runoff. And the belief is that, and this is written, so I always tell people, you can contact me and I'll send you the official documentation. These things are readily available. But the documentation for the city of Atlanta in Georgia, for instance, showed that when the city planners decided to create the city and erect it, they said we would never want a white person to live in a neighborhood that would be considered of less value than a place where Black people are. So we want to make sure always that the best land, the most appropriate place for fresh air, fresh water, whatever the case might be, access to things, is always a space where white people are. Black people get whatever's left over, okay? And so this meant things like the well runoff, because we didn't have indoor plumbing. So your toilets that are outside, it's running down a hill. Black people are usually downhill when they're doing city planning. So it means that the crops and everything else have been soiled, per se, by the waste of the white people who are up at the top of this hill. So even the vegetables that you're growing are saturated with their urine or whatever else is in their house or in their neighborhood, their hogs or whatever, the decay, their graveyards, their cemetery, whatever is up there that's sickly or poorly is being run down. When the rain comes, it's being washed downhill. And then this is what you're considering to be a prime space for Black people. Why? Because they're not fully human. They don't deserve to have the same things that a white person who is human has, right? And by that same token, you know, the belief is that if you give Black people anything that's of value, that they will absolutely tear it up. Okay. So if you and they were absolutely
this brings me back to the discussion that's been pop up lately about this great brother from France who's running to museum and you know just grabbing our ancestral arts and trying to put it back, and those musea, even including in Holland, they be telling like, okay, you're African, you are not able of keeping those things safe and in great shape and so on and so on. Well, it's been in our possessions for hundreds and hundreds of years before it, you know, before it ended up to the museum and for them keeping it. So it's like the same thing, like you Black or you African, you are not able to keep or to all those stuff. That's why it has to be in our museum, because we bet on that and we bet on this, we bet on that.
You know, and you're absolutely right, Don. This is I would say maybe 15 years ago or so, there was a white archaeologist who just tampering with stuff. He found, it didn't need to be found, it was where it was supposed to be, the Ark of the Covenant written about in the Bible. He found it. And so he goes to the tribe of Africans who are sitting there in South Africa and says, do you realize you have the Ark of the Covenant? And they're saying in their language, you know, they're saying, yes, we know what it is. And we've had it all these years. It's been passed down and it's been hidden in plain view. So you wouldn't take it. And he goes, they don't understand me. They have no concept of what I'm saying. He doesn't understand the language. But they're saying, we know. And when we heard you were coming, we sent it from here into Zimbabwe because they have an army and a military that's going to protect it. Someone finally translates and tells this guy, they sent it across the border. So just the concept that they knew he was coming, and because they know that you steal, okay? So it's in Zimbabwe, they find it, it's being hidden out, and the guy tells them, the guards in Zimbabwe tell them, we know exactly what you're looking for, we do have it. We will give you a photo of it. We'll give you video to show that we have it, but you can't cross our border. We don't want you here, right? So he gets it, they show the video and he's looking and he's crying. This white man is slobbering. He's all over the ground. He's just in tears. They have it. Why do they have it? Why is it in there? Why do they have it? And the guard tells him they have it because it was always theirs. Why do you feel that you can take the antiquities of the world and put them on the shelf to keep them safe from the people who own them? They were never yours in the first place. But that concept didn't register because he's still saying these are backwards, simple people. They're nomadic. Nomadic is the same thing as saying primitive. These are animals. They move and migrate with the animals like a herd. His whole language and concept wouldn't let him deal with the fact that they're moving because they understand how the earth moves. And they know this, they stay here, right? Come on. They know if they stay here in this space, a drought is coming. And they're going to go this way because they're going with food. They're listening to a natural cycle. You know, that's telling them, come on. That's why they're still alive. They were the first people, and they'll be the last.
That's right.
Because they know how to listen to the spiritual thing that's telling them you need to move this way because the earth is telling you to shift.
Shifting.
Some things are sinking. Some things are right. So the
water's coming up. Yeah.
You need to go this way. Right. So they know exactly what they're doing. All right. You don't. And so again, it's this concept that these are primitive, backward, ape-like people rather than high evolved humans who know the value of the thing that they have. So it's like it didn't just fall out of nowhere. It belonged to them. And the odd thing was the way, you'll get this, you love this. The Ark of the Covenant, the way it was described in biblical text and all types of liturgy,
yeah,
is actually designed like a seat, but it's really a drum.
Mm.
It's a drum with sticks that go along the sides of it. So the whole time you're watching these people just beating on this thing, and you don't get it. And then he starts to see here are the poles, and they're solid gold. And here's this other piece here, but it's masked as a drum. And so because you think this is some primitive instrument, you never understood that it was hidden in plain sight from you the entire time. Right. So yeah, when we start dealing with just those artifacts and trying to get into museums and take them back and all of this other stuff, this is not European history. And a lot of these things were taken from grave sites. And I know this is slightly off topic, but you're taking your grave robbing. And when you do things like that, what you don't understand is that there's a spiritual connection to these artifacts. And that is why it's like you're robbing a grave, and you're going to have to deal with the consequences of what you've done in a very long-ranging type of way.
Yeah, and it's happening. And it's happening. There are a lot of stories that expedition people are dying and having accidents. We don't hear about it, but you can find it on the to go back on topic with the spiritual, before this is what I do, is we left off at the housing, because I think, how do we recognize here, because you spoke of US, how do we recognize here in Holland? Where do we find, do you know where to find the evidence?
It's a quick question with certain things. If you had all the money that you needed, would you be able to go into any neighborhood you chose and purchase a house or a condominium? All right, so there you answer my question for me. All right.
I think
so. It's not based it's not based upon economics. Then what is it based upon? All right. So is there, we call it redlining here, where you basically say that because these people are Black, they will automatically devalue the property once they've touched their hands on it. Now, houses, and sometimes jewelry, I think, are the only things that appreciate. But if a Black person gets the property, it depreciates. What makes this systemic racism is that there's systems involved. You won't be able to get the loan for the house. You won't be able to sign off on this. There are covenants that tell you you cannot come into this place. And if I'm a white person and I own this house, I've signed a document when I purchased the house that said if I ever leave this house, I cannot, under law, sell it to you as a Black person. That's systemic. All right. So if you're telling me that those things, and they're global, these issues are global. This is not just America. So when I say, if you go into a neighborhood and it is predominantly white, that's one thing. If it's all white, that's something totally different. Right. And if it's all white, and even, or perhaps the servants might be Black, or it doesn't even have to be a wealthy space. It could be apartments. It could be condos. It could be a space where we don't want Black people here. Understand that there are usually covenants that are written into the leases, or the developers decide, I've developed and put so much money into creating this space, I don't want it devalued, so I don't want Black people here.
And the devalue is, of course, because
we don't. And again, the banker, a lot of the documentation was there for that, and so if people need it, they can pull it back from that. But there were certain rules that said, Black people are animalistic. Okay, they're better suited for outdoor living. Okay, all right. So they're going to tear up the frames of the house. They're not going to keep the lawns up. They're going to invite people over, and illegal activity and vice will be taking place inside the house. The police will come to the house because the men and women don't get along with each other. So they'll be fighting and this, because their nature is animalistic. They're not humans like we are. Okay. So they don't handle property or their home life the way that white people do. Black people fight and they curse and they're loud and they play music too loud and they do this, and they're trifling and they don't empty their trash, and then there'll be rats in the place. And so the other part of this is, on paper, again, a white person, as soon as you move into that neighborhood, if they go and try and value their house at that point, and it's clear that you live there, their house is now devalued for between 50 and 75% of what they initially purchased it for. That's systemic.
Dr. Shantella, I mean, this is from my own point of view, right? Like, I had some trouble finding out that, like, a well-known brother, I'm not backlashing on him. I'm not jealous about him at all, just to be clarified. But I mean, I had some trouble to find out that he had really a really expensive house just among wealthy white people. So I was like, hold on a second. I couldn't understand. Is that something wrong with me to not get into that? I mean, because I was like, I could not get it. How no, I knew how he managed to get his money, but why he's chosen to have one of the most expensive houses among, just among wealthy white people as a black person? I could not get to that. Like I was like, is there something wrong with me to think like that?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. If you had a comparable wealthy neighborhood full of black people, does such a thing exist? So here's the thing. If we were years ago in California, there was an area called Baldwin Hills. All right. Baldwin Hills was where it was mansions. It's beautiful, spacious, palatial type of space. But you had a whole group of black folks who were living in this neighborhood. So it was the Sammy Davis Juniors. And it was the Natalie Coles, and it was the Arthur Ashe, and the brother that wrote Roots and all that. So if they're in that neighborhood and it's a comparable, is there a space? If he says, I just want a mansion, I want something that's big and beautiful, and the only place this house exists, or these types of houses exist, is in this neighborhood where these white people are, you can't actually fault them for that. Now, if you have a neighborhood where it's full of black folks and they have same types of houses, they're big, they're expensive, they're all of this, and he chooses to go to the white side rather than the black side, you definitely have an issue with that. All right. Sometimes it's just, I wouldn't necessarily be able to get that house, even as a scholar. But if he's someone who has that type of money and influence, and he can get into that neighborhood, trust me, he'll still be the only one who will be there. But that type of influence gained him access. All right. I doubt seriously that any of us would be able to move into that neighborhood even with the money. And so you literally, like I said, it's about the equity of a thing. If you have black folks who are wealthy enough and they have their own spaces like this, then that's brilliant. That then becomes just about the economics of it. If you can afford it, you can be there. If I can't afford it, I couldn't be on either side. If I have the money and the white people tell me I can't, that's an issue. If he has the money and he fought to get in there, like I tried to get in here and they told me no 20 times, and I did some type of outlandish thing to make sure I could get it, I would have an issue with that. Because they've already told you they don't want you. Okay. And so these are, again, you have to understand when people have these types of systemic issues with having black people / monkeys in their backyard, they would tend to call the police and create problems for him in that home so that he would never be comfortable in it. All right. And that would be my only concern with that. When people don't want you there and they start doing underhanded things, your house is your castle. And I believe that black men are kings. You're the king and this is your castle. So you can't have a neighbor calling the police on you, over foolishness because they don't want you there. They don't like seeing that you have what they have. And again, it's that projection of, if I worked hard to get this, or I didn't work hard to get this, and then I see a black person has the same thing, equal or greater value, mentally and emotionally, that does things to white, minds sometimes when they're not being stable. And it's not all white people. So please, when I say white people, I'm using a broad brush, but it's a few. I ain't gonna say a few. It's quite a few white folks that have issues just with black people having at least what they have and more. And they would tell you, I'm not racist because I don't believe black people should be in slavery and da. But they still don't believe, as that monkey syndrome, that you really belong on my level and certainly not above me. Okay. Certainly not above me.
Clear, very clear. A short recap and a short, before we go to the spiritual, then we have time to close. Of course, there are a few people who are listening and watching and agreeing what you are saying, Dr. Shantella and the Don. Ajay, welcome. She is saying thank you for pointing. She has a 4-year-old and is going to their schools, and it's crazy. So she's saying, yeah, the weekend homeschooling is really good. She also mentioned Kamali homeschooling. I don't know Kamali homeschooling. So here you go. Kamali homeschooling is also somewhere you can go. And Clifford Schots is also watching. Welcome, Clifford. And there's another, I think it's another brother who's also watching and saying, Kuzangama Lei. I don't know if it's a brother or a sister, and is also agreeing to what you all are saying. We're going to the spiritual, or are we going to a short recap? Let me see if I can recap this from the top of my head. Oké, het schoolsysteem. Eigenlijk zijn alle platformen hetzelfde, toch, Don? Is het allemaal dezelfde gedachte? En de gedachte is, we hebben niet te doen met mensen, als we het hebben over zwarte mensen, hebben we te doen met nog net mensen, maar onder andere ladder, net iets meer dan een aap.
Ze kunnen het niet, ze kunnen het minder.
Darwin's theorie. En dat geldt voor alle platformen waar we het over hebben gehad. Dus als we de popculture verlaten, dan komen we bij het schoolsysteem, komen we bij het medische, de medische wereld.
Medische, biologische aspecten, huh?
Juist, dan, en we hebben het over huizen, dus het,
Huizing.
woningbouwverenigingen, dat hele rataplan komt eigenlijk op hetzelfde neer. De gedachte is, je bent net geen mens, dus we willen je hier niet. En als je hier bent, dan zullen we ervoor zorgen dat we, als we het hebben over het huis zijn, dus als we het hebben over woninggelegenheid, als je heel dicht bij ons komt, willen we dat niet, want je gaat ons wonen vernietigen, vervuilen, je hebt alleen maar feestjes, enzovoort, enzovoort. Dus we willen je hier niet. En dat zit zelf in de wet opgenomen. En als je dan het wel voor elkaar krijgt, heb je gewoon kans dat je heel veel problemen krijgt. Dus het is, Dr. Shantella adviseert dat niet te doen, eigenlijk. Want je krijgt alleen maar problemen daarmee. En waarom? Omdat je dan een heleboel negativiteit over je heen krijgt en je het uiteindelijk niet wint. Dat is eigenlijk wat ze zegt. Natuurlijk moet je zelf weten wat je doet. Maar als je kijkt naar de wet, het is opgenomen in de wet, het moment dat iemand van Afrikaanse origine daar komt wonen, in de buurt komt wonen waar alleen maar witte mensen zijn en het is in die wet opgenomen, dat zelf de waarde van je huis daalt. Heb ik dat allemaal goed verteld, Don?
Ja, plus minus. Ik kwam een beetje overheen.
Een beetje mijn eigen woorden, Jip en Janneke taal. Maar het gaat...
Het is meer... We moeten ons bewust zijn als zwarte dat er gewoon een systeem bestaat dat gewoon ons inferieur ziet. En iedereen die onderdeel maakt van dat systeem, inclusief dus zeg maar de witte mensen, die hanteren ook dat systeem. Dus ook al zeggen ze, ja, we zijn niet racistisch, maar datgene wat ze doen, zoals bijvoorbeeld huizing of dat je bijvoorbeeld voor de medische controle gaat en zo, dat is al dat een bril. De manier hoe ze kijken naar zwarte al benadelende is, omdat zij zitten met het syndroom, die ze geërfd hebben van Darwin en de andere professor voorheen, dat er diep in hun ziet dat, je hebt mensen, dat zijn hun, je hebt dieren en je hebt net zwarte mensen die net dieren zijn en mensen wanna be like. Dat is een beetje waar we ons bewust van moeten zijn.
En waarom we dat benadrukken, we kennen het aapsyndroom, maar dat aapsyndroom, ik noem het even aapsyndroom, dat gaat zo ver. Het is niet alleen, de aap is eigenlijk de surface, dat is wat er aan de bovenkant gebeurt. En dat zie je ook dat mensen daar grapjes over maken, lacherig over doen, maar het gaat veel dieper dan dat. Het is niet alleen maar het grapje van de aap, maar het is je uitsluiten of het je moeilijk maken of je kansen verkleinen. En dat is waarom we dit gesprek hebben, dat is waarom dit gesprek ook heel belangrijk is. Back to the spiritual. Don, you had a question about that.
Yeah, I was like, we know Auntie Tina told us about what's love had to do with it. What I would like to know is what religion has to do with it.
Well, the odd thing is, they say the science and religion don't mix, but they do have compatible beliefs about Africans and monkeys and animalistic traits. And so at the same time that you're having some of these theories come about with Darwin, you also have the church where you have these missionaries that are going about and saying, well, here's how we're going to reinterpret the Bible. All right. When God created man, that was white men. When he created the beasts of the field the day before, that was the African, right? And Africans, along with all the other animals, are supposed to be dominated by and over and managed and named by white people. All right. So the logistics of that, of course, they don't make sense when you understand that in antiquity, if you're going to, you can use any religion. But if you're specifically talking about the Christian religion, in antiquities, God was always represented as African. So it's not logical. It's absolutely fallible and it's silly. You go to Rome and you go into the basement where the Pope is praying. The Madonna and Child are African, all right? And so when you start to look at some of these things, there's always an economic component to the racism that you kind of drop into things. And so you know better. But the church, in many instances, specifically the Catholic Church, and I can go on record with this, have a long, long story history. The Jesuits, all of them have a long story history of going into African spaces, calling the people there savages and animals and saying that they're there to save them. And it's like, right, but you're using the most barbaric things, right, in order to quote unquote save someone. And then you tell them, we're turning you over to, you know, God and this, and this, when the reality is everything that you're trying to give them started with them. They know better what you're saying than you do, but because you don't, once again, understand the language. You don't understand the culture, and you don't understand that written words weren't written as words, they were written as pictures. Okay, so anytime you tell me someone is going into Egypt or into Sudan and they're coming out with things that they believe are pictures, I always say you need to get someone to interpret what it is that you see. Because chances are what you have is a book or a tablet as opposed to a photo. This is not a picture. This is not a painting. All right. So when you don't understand the alphabet, then you don't understand the language. And what you think you see is not exactly what you see. So when we're dealing with religion, again, you start to have this concept of, if I can use scripture or some type of liturgy that's supposed to be spiritual to say that you are either part of the devil's spawn or you're the beast of the field, I am supposed to have dominion over you and I'm supposed to manage you because you are less than. You are not supposed to be in the great chain of being. All right. And so, of course, once again, we know that this is fallible, but there are still churches and seminaries that teach this now. They're still teaching this. So you can imagine, and I hope the Pope that they have lives a long time, but every time a Pope dies and they have to get a new one and they say, okay, this African is in line to be the next Pope. The world is collectively holding their breath. This is like, okay, because a lot of people understand that your faith supersedes your politics, your economics. And this is one of the reasons why Jews have such a rough time with a lot of things. Because if it's based upon your faith comes first. In America, the reason why most people didn't want John Kennedy, for instance, to be the president, they said it's because he was Catholic. Not just because he was Irish, but because he was Catholic. Why? Because the Catholic people rely on the Pope. They don't rely on US laws. So if you all of a sudden have a president who's talking to the Vatican in another country to determine how he's going to vote on Roe versus Wade, even though that hadn't come up yet, but on all these housing laws or discrimination or this, and this, he's not dealing with politics. He's dealing with his faith. And if his faith is based in Rome, then you have no real authority over him. All right. So it was I wasn't born again, but it wasn't, fictional to believe that John Kennedy would be shot, that he would be assassinated. There were a lot of people that did not want this man as president because you could not tell where his loyalties would lie. They had to lie with the Catholic Church. So when you think in terms of people saying slavery, we want the Catholic Church to apologize for slavery. Well, you can apologize, but are you not still a part of enslaving people now? And what is that enslavement based upon? And where are those people? And if you're still telling me that those people are on the continent of Africa, and they're there, and this is connected to some type of systemic industry, diamonds, bauxite, minerals, property, all of these things, then you're still telling me that you're dealing with this animal versus human. Because Christianity just went right out the window. You're not talking about, they've all been Christianized, all right?
Yep.
At least on the surface, all right?
Yep.
So you have no business coming in there doing anything to them that you wouldn't do to the people in Rome. Doesn't make sense. So there are a lot of people, even though they won't come right out and say it like that anymore, they still believe it. And so just a few years ago, the Supreme Court had to deal with an education ruling about allowing Black people in affirmative action. And we had an Italian, Antonin Scalia. All right, he had been there for ages. He was in his 80s at this point. But he started making part of a ruling, and he says, because it's understood that Blacks, the descendants of Africans, have a low capacity to be able to do most things. So we should not allow them to just enter into schools under affirmative action rules, because basically he wouldn't come right out and say it, but you're putting an animal in a space with people. You're taking up a space just because they're Black and saying that they deserve to have a space here, when the reality is they don't have the capacity to learn in the first place. All right. They don't have what it takes to do this, because on an evolutionary scale, they've stopped right here in the middle. All right. So what you're doing is taking something from one of these white people who actually deserves it and can do it, just to say we want to be equal and fair by allowing this animal into the ranks. All right. And so he got all types of heat and flack for it. And I would say not too long after that, he ended up passing away anyway. But that was one of the legacies of his entire time on the Supreme Court. And he had been there for decades.
Wow.
Right?
So yeah.
So how many other rulings did he make that had that mindset? It's somewhere in them, but didn't have to be said. These are Black people, so they don't have the capacity to do this. They don't have the capacity to have property. They don't have the capacity to get loans. They don't have the capacity to own businesses, to manage their own affairs, to have property and land. USDA, the agricultural department. Black people who have land, they want to farm. Black people don't need that land. They only tear it up. So it brought into question every ruling that this man had ever made, in my estimation, because all of a sudden it became clear Black people are still subhuman. They're still less than. They're still not fully human in his mind. And so people just chalked it up to, well, he's in his 80s, and that's the way people were taught then. But those laws are still being used now, and people are still being taught that now. Right. So it all goes full circle. And again, for him to be Italian and Catholic, the Catholic Church is determining how he views what it is that he says in that room. And so based on that, is like, I don't separate them. I don't separate his politics from his faith.
Now I understand that.
Clear, very clear.
Now I understand that.
Yeah. So there's a whole, whole heap, a loop, but still coming back to the same uitgangspunt.
Yeah.
We still have 15 minutes left.
May I? Dr. Shantella, the first time when we watched I think it was the first edition, the first version of the Planet of the Apes, right? The first time when we watched that movie, I was like, for 3 days I could not sleep, because I was like, now I understand, now I get it. Like, there are some people on Earth, they wasn't on Earth thousands of years ago, for any other reason, they just came, and before we knew, humans have been, how could I say, have been taken captive by those we may call apes, because genetically, some of us do not have Neanderthal DNA, right? So first time when we watched the movie, I was like, now I understand what happened. Is that wrong for me for thinking that way? Like, the real apes took humans captive, or I mean,
it's what it is. It's about the outsider trying to interpret what they see on the inside. but having no guidebook and no rules. And so all of your biases go into how you see what it is that you see, how you frame it. Okay, so whether it's the Planet of the Apes and trying to figure out, okay, you think that's a monkey, but the intellect is far beyond your capacity. Okay, you think that you're holding something captive, and it's actually holding you captive. A lot of people said that the Planet of the Apes, again, was actually a narrative about blackness and whiteness. That the reality was, you know, if you've been enslaved by some people and you know the cruelty that they're capable of, it's rare that you're going to show them what you're actually capable of. So Black people wear masks. We wear them all the time, especially in this country. All right. The person that you think, and we saw this with the banker, the person you think that's there to clean the floors is actually a millionaire in his own right, but he knows he can't gain access to that bank and the information that he needs in order to do the things that he does as a businessman, unless he has that jumper on and has that mop or that broom in his hand. Okay. We wear masks all the time. It's how we survive certain things. The problem now is that we keep giving people the keys and the codes to what it is that we're doing. We're too quick to talk about it. So it's like, just stop talking. Okay. Do what you need to do, because again, you're playing at this, but these people are at war for their natural survival. And it comes out like that. Why do you need to be cruel and have separate but equal? You got to keep things separate but equal. Okay. And so when you're talking pop culture, if you're going to do the Planet of the Apes, when you do something that converges with it in modern day, you can do Black Panther. When I started to listen to the language of the film, where I have white people saying things like, oh, it's just a third world country. Have you ever been on the ground in an African nation? They all right. Trust me, they're okay. All right. When you say, oh, there's poverty and there's this, and this, there's poverty here. There's poverty where you are. Why do they get to be called a certain type of way? And once you've labeled something, and that's spiritual, once you label something and it transforms, right, you're trying to transform it into, that's what you see. And you can't see beyond that. All right. Then when you convince the people that you've labeled that they are that thing, half the work is done.
And that's the point.
Half the work is done. The thing is, we know what white people say about us. We know racism when it shows up. We've always been able to fight against it, because it's like, yeah, you think I'm a monkey? All right, I'm gonna play monkey and scratch my head for you in public and, you know, grin, and I'm gonna get on around the corner. But then years later, when you find out that the old washerwoman down south passed away, and she had $200,000 in a mattress to turn over to a Black college to ensure that some Black students could go to school. You didn't know what you were seeing. All you saw was the washerwoman. The people who were there knew to hold her secret and mind their business, because they were fine. And she was building something that was greater than what you could see. Right? And so again, the problem now is when we deconstruct and we decode them. But we never tell our secrets. Come on. All right. You need to go back to the books will save you. This is Zora Neale Hurston. I'm going to hit a straight lick with a crooked stick. If you don't understand what that means, you need to find out. That's what I'm saying. We tell things too much. Sometimes it's like, no, I'm going to hit a straight lick with a crooked stick. You won't see this coming. By the time you catch up with me, all right? By the time you catch up with me, I'm sitting somewhere drinking margaritas. And you have fallen into the hole that you set for me. The problem now is we're gassing. Yeah, when I get over here, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And what I plan to do is this, and this. Every time we talk, I say the same thing. If it's the same people on the line, I'm going to keep asking. When we first started talking, I told you needed to start some community-based things. You need to start doing certain things in your household. Are you greeting your children every morning with, you are amazing and wonderful, all right? I'm praying over you. I know everything is fine. You can do this. I got your back. There's nothing in the world more brilliant and fantastic than you are. Let's do this. If you're not with the parent of this kid, are you still trying to meet up once a week? If not once a week, once a month, to have a sit down meal, because even if you hate each other, your children have to know and be real clear, you are worth the sacrifice. You are worth me sacrificing my time with this crazy man or crazy woman who I don't even like anymore, because you are that much value. Are you as a Black male going to the school to ensure that when these white people see this woman come in here, she's coming in with her husband or the father of this child who still thinks that the child has value. If you still aren't doing these things, if you haven't gotten to a point where you've let whatever this other stuff is go and you're doing the work, then everything else that we talk about, it negates it. It just falls by the wayside. It doesn't count. You can deconstruct as much as you want. But if in your own house, you're not building, everything that you tear down out there, your children are still going to walk into the rubble. They got to be strong enough to rebuild this stuff and pull it in another direction. All right. So again, I don't have children, and I keep saying this. My job is to parent the parents and help them get their kids in the right direction.
For real.
I have nothing to lose. All right. There's nothing for me to lose at this point. So it's literally, I need you to do the work where you say, this child and their future is more valuable to me than my comfort. All right.
Exactly.
You need to get into what John Lewis says, some good trouble. You need to you can get into trouble as an adult. It's all right.
Exactly. Yes.
Save off the kid.
Yeah. Totally agree. And we spoke so many times about these kind of topics is what can we do? Because we can talk about the issue, but it's always what can we do? And your message is clear. You have to fix the household first. Do the work there with your child. And it's nothing. And when you're on the street, you just greet and you say, hey, beautiful sister, hey, beautiful brother. That's also a start.
Even more from that, because Dr. Shantella got me inspired. I am a black father, he rule.
There it is. That's it. Yes, that's it. Your children think that, again, there's no authority in your children's lives except yours. What you say is the law. All right. So you are the police, you are the God, you are the provider, you are the protector, you are the fun person. What you say is it. And so it's like, yeah, you gotta own that. But it means that you have the responsibility and you gotta own that. You know, you are their heroes. Until you just lay down and just be like, I ain't bothered with it.
Even then, we're still finding the force, you know, because I have millions of ancestors with me.
And you know, it really takes a long time for children not to see the father as the hero. A very long time, really.
Yeah.
Just want to make a comment about Sophia. She said, yes, the book of the art of war talks about this.
Yes. So and Sophia, by the way, that's Dr. Sparks over there. Dr. Sparks, that's Dr. Sparks over at Acumen with me. So sending you love, Sophie.
Very good. Yes, thank you for watching. Yeah, I think we have to close. I think we have 7 minutes.
Yeah, time goes fast when you're having fun.
Yes, exactly. It was a really good session again. Could you just wrap it up in, because you're the expert in English, just a short briefing. This is how you say it, right? Recap of this.
Well, you know, the brief of it really is this whole idea of Africans, of Black people as monkeys. It won't necessarily go away. I don't expect it to go away. But you do need to understand where it comes from and the legs, the tentacles it has in all of these avenues that we've talked about: the housing, the education, the law, politics, religion. All these different pop culture, all this, okay, and religion. And understand that you're going to keep bumping heads with this no matter what. And you can challenge it as much and as often as you can. But the greater thing to do is to create within your own space. Again, you have to, as you're deconstructing and tearing down, you have to build up, and you have to start building in your homes first and foremost. You have to make sure that you and your kids are mentally, spiritually, emotionally strong and wrapped up and girded up so that when you encounter these things, they don't deflate you to a point where you can't keep moving. All right. And you have to make certain sacrifices inside your home and in your immediate community to ensure that you are okay, that your kids are okay, and that what you're building now isn't something that in the next generation can just be toppled over because the kids didn't have a clear understanding of what it was that you were doing and why it was important. This is for the long haul. And the fight continues, but it's a winnable fight. We're already winning. As far as I'm concerned, the final scores have us so far ahead at this point that we could actually walk backwards into this, but we still have to keep moving. Right? This is not the time to sit down. We literally have to keep moving into this. So You know, I would just encourage people, read as much as possible. Find books, not the trashy novel, thank you, but something that really enriches and encourages you and will encourage others. Share your books, all right? Share the information that you get. If you have social media platforms, just don't talk about the foolishness of the day. Impart a little bit of wisdom. Whatever you're learning, share it with some folks. You know, have a little dialogue with it and just try and keep growing as much as possible.
Thank you very much. In French, or are we going to skip that?
Bah oui, bah c'est possible, c'est pas un problème, on peut faire ça. Mais j'ai pas assez de temps, j'ai juste 2 minutes. Niet genoeg tijd, 2 minuten om dat...
Ja, we hebben niet zoveel tijd meer. Dat is wat mijn klein beetje Frans. Eigenlijk komt het hierop neer. Vergelijken met de aap. Witte mensen zoals ze denken, racisme, dat gaat niet stoppen. Maar wij moeten zorgen dat we goed geïnformeerd zijn. Ik praat nu Nederlands, Engels. Goed geïnformeerd zijn en dat we thuis ook het werk doen. Dat we onze kinderen eigenlijk klaarstomen voor deze... voor deze maatschappij, toch? Zodat zij niet weer van scratch moeten beginnen. Dat is echt in een nutshell. Wat ik nog wil zeggen, die 2 minuten, 3 minuten, wilde ik eigenlijk nog... Dr. Shantella, I want to give you a chance to just share your links and your socials and whatever. Where people can reach you? Where can people reach you?
Emails, you can do Shantella Sherman, all one word, lowercase, at theacumengroup.org. You can visit the website, www.theacumengroup.org. And you can do Doc Shantella on Facebook. What is it on Twitter? It's Dr. Shantella on Twitter. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the Acumen Group, Acumen Magazine, I think it's the Acumen Group 1 on Twitter for the magazine. And I just want to say this, you know, I always feel light and just amazed when I hear you all speaking in another language. Black people speaking something other than English just makes me really proud. Right? I'm literally like, see, that in and of itself is proof positive that, you know, we got skills. You know, we're the bomb. All right. If it's the last thing, I'm gonna learn Dutch.
Awesome.
I'm gonna learn Surinamese. Eyedontha, next time I see you, I'm gonna kill it. I'm telling you.
Well, next time, remember what next time is? Next time is the 28th. Didn't we say the 28th?
It's 28th or 29th.
29?
It's that Tuesday.
29th of December, that's on a Tuesday. We are going to do a film screening of Django Unchained. We gaan een film screening met Dr. Shantella van Django Unchained. En dan gaan we wat we vandaag geleerd hebben, gaan we daarin verder deconstructen. Dus bij deze, hou eens in de gaten, check de pagina House of Khepera, je weet ons te vinden. Don, heb jij nog linkjes die je wilt delen?
Well, no links, just a big shout out to all the great Black women worldwide. We love you and keep inspiring us and give other strains because it started by you and it's getting back to you.
Oh, love to the brother.
Aquarius age.
I find it really hard to say goodbye, but this is an au revoir. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much, everybody. Well, thank you very much for watching. Hope to see you again next time. I think we have either on Monday or next Saturday, we will have another In Conversation With. We always keep it, you know, on the, how you say it, a verrassing. We always keep it a verrassing. Thank
surprise.
you. Surprise. Thank you very much, Dr. Shantella, for joining us. Learned a lot. It's like, poof, my head is exploding. And thank you very much, Don. Next time. Again.
Always a pleasure.
Bye.
We're always here. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Otepu.
Yeah.